Picture Book of Martin Luther King Jr. by David A. Adler. Illustrated by Robert Casilla. Cover of book. A young, smiling African-American boy wearing a purple button-up shirt, red pants, and sneakers rides a blue bicycle on a walkway in front of a white house with green trim. There is a lawn on both sides of him. On the left, a tree and some bushes grow by the house. On the right is a white fence that covers part of the neighbor's house, which is also white but has blue accents. An illustration spans over 2 pages. On the right, Martin Luther King Jr., an adult African-American man, can be seen from the waist up. He stands in front of several microphones and has his left arm raised in the air as he gives a speech. Behind him stand a group of adults and children and several clergy members of all different races and skin tones. Several people hold flags.
Martin Luther King Jr. was one of America's great leaders. He was a powerful speaker, and he spoke out against laws which kept black people out of many schools and jobs. He led protests and marches demanding fair laws for all people.
Three black children, 2 boys and a girl, sit on concrete steps at the end of a walkway in front of a white house with green accents. A blue bike with red accents is propped up with a kickstand to the right of the children.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia. Martin's father was a pastor. His mother had been a teacher. Martin had an older sister, Willie Christine, and a younger brother, Alfred Daniel.
Martin and his 2 siblings are dressed in purple choir robes with golden stoles around their shoulders. They each hold a red folder and have their mouths open as if singing. The background behind them is a mix of pink, purple, and blue watercolor. A note at the bottom of the page reads, Martin, center, with his brother Alfred Daniel, left, and his sister Willie Christine, right.
Young Martin liked to play baseball, football, and basketball. He liked to ride his bicycle and to sing. He often sang in his father's church.
A group of 5 boys are huddled up. 4 of the boys have on football helmets and they all have on football jerseys in red, white, or blue. With their arms around each other, several of the boys' hands can be seen. Some are white and others are black. A football sits on the ground behind them.
Young Martin played in his backyard with his friends. One day he was told that 2 of his friends would no longer play with him because they were white and he was black.
A view from the side, chest up, of Martin crying. His mother holds his head to her shoulder. Both have tears running down their faces.
Martin cried. He didn't understand why the color of his skin should matter to anyone. Martin's mother told him that many years ago black people were brought in chains to America and sold as slaves. She told him that long before Martin was born, the slaves had been set free. However, there were still some people who did not treat black people fairly.
Illustration pans over 2 pages of a park with a slide, swings, and seesaws, with many children playing on them. A large sign in all capital letters reading, White Only, is posted in the ground. To the right of the play equipment is a small building behind a tree. A sign on it reads, Restroom, White Only.
In Atlanta, where Martin lived, and elsewhere in the United States, there were white-only signs. Black people were not allowed in some parks, pools, hotels, restaurants, and even schools. Blacks were kept out of many jobs.
Martin Luther King, as an older child wearing a button-up shirt, holds a book open in front of him as he reads. Above him are black and white watercolor paintings of Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and George Washington Carver.
Martin learned to read at home before he was old enough to start school. All through his childhood, he read books about black leaders.
Martin, as a teenager in a white shirt, blue tie, and light brown blazer, stands at a podium behind several microphones. A group of people stand below him, most of whom appear to be African American. Many are smiling, and several have a hand reached up in the air or are clapping.
Martin was a good student. He finished high school 2 years early and was just 15 when he entered Morehouse College in Atlanta. At college, Martin decided to become a minister.
Martin stands smiling in a white suit coat with a blue bow tie. A smiling woman in a lacy wedding dress and a veil stands with her arm linked through his elbow, her other arm resting on his forearm.
After Martin was graduated from Morehouse, he studied for a doctorate at Boston University. While he was there, he met Coretta Scott. She was studying music. They fell in love and married.
A young, white, clean-shaven police officer in a blue uniform frowns as he holds the right arm of a black woman behind her back. She is dressed in a pink dress with glasses and a blue hat and stands by a city bus. She looks unhappy.
In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. began his first job as a pastor in Montgomery, Alabama. The next year, Rosa Parks, a black woman, was arrested in Montgomery. She had been sitting just behind the white-only section on a bus. When all the seats in that section were taken, the driver told her to get up so a white man could have her seat. Rosa Parks refused.
An illustration in watercolor over 2 pages shows a large group of people standing in a crowd in a variety of darker colors. None of them have distinct features. 2 of the people at the front hold picket signs reading, "Boycott public buses" and "Equal rights." A car drives past the group.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a protest. Blacks throughout the city refused to ride the buses. Dr. King said, "There comes a time when people get tired of being kicked about."
An illustration spans 2 pages. On the left, a white house with green accents is seen with a broken window. On the right, Martin Luther King Jr. stands in front of the steps to the house and holds a microphone in his hands. He looks up into the distance and has a serious look on his face.
One night, while Dr. King was at a meeting, someone threw a bomb into his house. Martin's followers were angry. They wanted to fight. Martin told them to go home peacefully. "We must love our white brothers," he said. "We must meet hate with love."
A group of people of different races wait in line to board a city bus.
The bus protest lasted almost a year. When it ended, there were no more white-only sections on buses.
A large group of people with vaguely detailed faces, all painted in light brown, stand in a crowd and hold up colorful picket signs. The ones that can be seen read from left to right, "We march for jobs for all now." End segregated rules in public schools. We demand an end to bias now. We march for jobs for a decent pay now. We demand voting rights now. And we demand decent housing now.
Dr. King decided to move back to Atlanta in 1960. There, he continued to lead peaceful protests against white-only waiting rooms, lunch counters, and restrooms. He led many marches for freedom.
An illustration spans over 2 pages. Martin Luther King can be seen up close in the left-hand corner, his hand raised in the air. Below him, a crowd of thousands of people seen only as colorful dots fills all the space on the ground. Many hold up white signs. The Washington Monument can be seen in the background.
In 1963, Dr. King led the biggest march of all, the March on Washington. More than 200,000 black and white people followed him. "I have a dream," he said in his speech. "I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character."
Martin Luther King stands behind a podium and shakes hands with an older white man in a blue jacket.
The next year, in 1964, Dr. King was awarded one of the greatest honors any person can win, the Nobel Peace Prize.
A white man stands at a brick wall and uses the back end of a hammer to pry off nails holding a white-only sign off of a brick wall.
The country was changing. New laws were passed. Blacks could go to the same school as whites. They could go to the same stores, restaurants, and hotels. White-only signs were against the law.
An illustration spanning 2 pages shows white police officers with nightsticks and German Shepherd dogs rounding up, attacking, and arresting black men.
Dr. King told his followers to protest peacefully, but there were some riots and some violence.
An illustration spanning 2 pages shows on the left the walkway outside of rooms at a motel. On the right, a group of people stand on the walkway. They are all pointing to the left. Martin Luther King is laying on the ground. The people around him look angry.
Then, in April 1968, Dr. King went to Memphis, Tennessee. He planned to march so white and black garbage workers would get the same pay for the same work. On April 4th, in Memphis, Dr. King stood outside his motel room. Another man, James Earl Ray, was hiding nearby. He pointed a rifle at Dr. King. He fired the gun. An hour later, Dr. King was dead.
An illustration spanning 2 pages shows 2 horses pulling a wagon with a casket in it. Pallbearers walk alongside the casket and a group of thousands of other people walk behind them, filling the street.
Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of a world free of hate, prejudice, and violence. Carved on the stone which marks his grave are the words, "I'm free at last."
A page titled Important Dates. At the bottom is an illustration of Martin Luther King's grave with a bowl of flame in front of it. The gravestone reads, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., 1929 to 1968. Below that is inscribed the quote, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last."
Important dates. 1929. Born on January 15th in Atlanta, Georgia. 1947. Ordained a minister. 1953. Married Coretta Scott in Marion, Alabama. 1955 to 1956 led boycott of Montgomery, Alabama buses. 1963 led the March on Washington on August 28th and gave his I Have a Dream speech from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. 1964 was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. 1968 assassinated on April 4th in Memphis, Tennessee. 1983 the third Monday in January was declared an annual federal holiday by the United States Congress to honor the life and ideals of Martin Luther King Jr.
The end.